What is going on, Headliner Nation? The 2019 season is almost done, and there's been a lot of talk, a lot of fantasy football talk for me and Kyle over the past few months. Now, we had this idea that, hey, before everybody goes into hibernation and the season ends, let's go revisit some of our preseason calls and see how we did. We've, preached transparency on this channel, whether they were good calls or bad calls all season long. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back toward draft time and see how we did back then and see if we nailed anybody. But I'm not going to be doing it alone. As you can tell, me and Kyle are going to be doing this together. Kyle, how we doing?
Doing well, and it seems like 15 weeks was so long ago, but it really wasn't. So have to go back. Every single week we talked about our hits and misses. Well, let's go back to the beginning of the season where it all started and talk about those hits and misses.
Yeah, because that's kind of where you may have won or lost your fantasy season, right? We've given out a lot of information there in the preseason. Hey, these are the guys we like. These are the guys you have to go draft. And more than likely, if you took some of these guys, you benefited from it, or maybe not. But we're going to go through all four positions. There's going to be timestamps down below. Don't worry. Don't get all butthurt if you see how long the video is. You can go by position down below. I'll have that in the description. But let's go ahead first, Kyle, and let's kick it off with the quarterback position and see where we hit and miss here in 2019. All right, first name up on the list. He's currently quarterback 3 right now in fantasy football. And for the second year straight, Kyle, we got some crap for pumping up Dak Prescott in the preseason. You, my friend, have got 2 years worth of crap for Dak Prescott. But right now he was drafted as quarterback 17, currently quarterback 3, and having a great year. 4,300 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions. He's had at least 2 touchdowns passing, 10 out of 14 games played, and he's only had 2 weeks all year where he didn't score at least 18 fantasy points. Dak Prescott, probably one of our best quarterback calls here of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing with Dak Prescott. Like you said, 2 straight years. Last year, a lot of people were like, well, he wouldn't have been a QB1 if it wasn't for week 17. Well, you can't use that as an argument this year. Quarterback 3, an amazing season. It's what we said at the beginning of the year. You give the guy Amari Cooper, a top wide receiver 1, you're going to see him break out. And he's just been overlooked for so many years now, it feels like. I don't know what we're going to see going into next year, but when I called him a league winner, a lot of people said there is no way possible. But if you drafted Dak Prescott this year, more than likely you are in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, he returned to great value. Next one up, Jameis Winston. And this one is a little bit weird because you hear the name Jameis Winston, the first thing that pops into your mind is interceptions, and rightfully so. The guy has 24 of them this season, but he was drafted as quarterback 15. Currently, right now, quarterback 4, has 4,500 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 24 interceptions, and has thrown for at least 300 yards 10 out of 14 games. We liked him in the preseason because of the Bruce Arians type of offense, and with the emergence of Chris Godwin, who we'll talk about here in a few minutes, absolutely gave him some huge numbers fantasy-wise. NFL-wise, the turnovers, not too appealing, but you can make up for that with all these passing yards and touchdowns in fantasy football.
The best thing that can happen for fantasy owners is that he goes back to Tampa Bay and is in that offense again. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We talked about it all offseason, though. It was the volume that would make him the legit play here. Yes, if you own him, don't watch his games. Okay, put him in your lineup and then go do something for the afternoon because he's going to give you high blood pressure if you watch him. But the volume's always there. It's consistently there.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely returned on his investment. Now, next one up, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. He was drafted as quarterback 21 and right now is currently ranked quarterback 6. So far this year, 2,800 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But where he really, made you some money was 467 yards on the ground and 9 rushing touchdowns. Between weeks 7 and 15, he only has thrown 2 interceptions, playing great down the stretch. And a lot of, people didn't really want to touch him just because of the name, the Buffalo Bills in the preseason, but they brought in John Brown. They brought in Cole Beasley. We liked the rushing upside in the preseason, and Josh Allen, another one of these guys that you may have got towards the end of your draft, and he may be the reason you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, John Brown, who we said was a late round target for a lot of fantasy teams this year, has really helped Josh Allen become the deep threat that we know that he could. He had the big arm. It was kind of the midpoint accuracy that was a little bit of a concern for him, but he's been good. And I was on the Josh Allen hater train when he first was drafted, and I've changed my mind at this point. He's looking better. He's growing every game. You got to give it to him. He's just the whole offense, the whole team has looked great this year.
Yep, agreed. All right, lastly, the big name, Patrick Mahomes. Now, a lot of people thought we were absolutely bat crazy in the preseason when we told you to not draft him, that he was not worth his ADP. Not that he was going to do bad, but to be drafted right there in the second, third, fourth round in some leagues, depending on your league size, was just way too early. Now, he's currently quarterback 8, so it's not like he absolutely sucks this year, but he did miss 2 games with injury, but he only has 3,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, but only 4 interceptions, so he's still playing great. He just did not return the value that you had to take in order to get him in your draft. The 3 names above him have outproduced him, and they were all taken about 8 to 10 rounds after him. That's what we talked about in the preseason. Just too expensive for the quarterbacks. Wait on him, and then maybe you fall with the Dak Prescott later on, and you do just fine.
Yeah, if you've been a part of the channel since the preseason or bought the draft guide, we've always preached a late round quarterback strategy, and that's exactly why right here. Don't spend a second round pick on a quarterback. Maybe Lamar Jackson next year. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind for Lamar Jackson next year. We'll wait and see what happens, but Mahomes wasn't worth it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, let's move over to the miss column here. Now, the first one up, I know I personally did. I don't remember you pushing him too much, but I like Jimmy Garoppolo in the preseason. I'm like, this offense is going to really, have some weapons now. And it really happened, but it was more on the running back side of things. Jimmy G has played fine. It's just the offense really relied on those running backs with, I don't really want to say Tevin Coleman because he didn't do much, but Matt Breida, Raheem, quite a must-start Mostert down the stretch here. They hadn't really had to throw it every single week. He's had great games, but it just hasn't been enough. Quarterback 14 right now. I liked him a little bit more, one of those late-round guys that just didn't quite crack the top 12.
The thing about Jimmy Garoppolo is that defense was a lot better than all of us anticipated. And that's really why they were able to control the ball on the ground. But even going back to the beginning of the year, they had some injuries at running back that kind of derailed that. So the offense wasn't fully healthy. Marquise Goodwin didn't bounce back like we would hope. So Dante Pettis didn't end up being what we had hoped. It really took that Emmanuel Sanders trade and Deebo Samuel really breaking out for Jimmy Garoppolo to start being better. But at the beginning of the year, I mean, he wasn't really a top 20 quarterback option most weeks.
Yep, agreed. Next one up, and one that you and I took square on the chin, is Baker Mayfield, Cleveland Browns. Now, we pushed this offense a lot. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. Baker Mayfield was not one of them, absolutely. He was drafted as quarterback 4, currently quarterback 17. We loved him in the preseason. In my opinion, yes, a lot of the blame goes on to Baker Mayfield, but the play calling and the coaching for some of these games just didn't make sense. I mean, we were seeing Odell Beckham at time line up in the backfield. I just didn't understand it. It didn't mesh well from the get-go. Now here, second half of the season, it's gotten a little bit better, but it's nowhere near where we thought it would be. Baker Mayfield paying the price right now, quarterback 17.
Yeah, it's been a rough year for the Cleveland Browns outside of Nick Chubb. Even Kareem Hunt hasn't been bad here towards the end of the year. He's helped fantasy owners who held on to him or picked him up late. But yeah, Baker Mayfield definitely hasn't been what we thought he would. He's actually been a lot better here towards the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. And that says a lot for how bad the beginning of the season was.
Yeah, it was bad. Absolutely. Lastly, Derek Carr, somebody who I talked about as a bounce back quarterback, another one of these guys you could get late. The reason I liked him, though, is at the time he had Antonio Brown. So things kind of changed a little bit. I mean, he had no weapons for the majority of the season outside of Darren Waller and Tyrell Williams the first few weeks. It's just that lack of weapons really hurt his upside. It's not that he played bad at all. He just didn't really produce bigger numbers to return, that late value like we kind of thought he would have. I mean, he excels at throwing the deep ball. I really figured that him and Antonio Brown would mesh. Once Antonio Brown left, the guy's season was basically doomed to be a low-end quarterback 2, and he ended up right here, quarterback 18.
Yeah, the offense as a whole was just I mean, Tyrell Williams, he was scoring quite a bit of touchdowns at the beginning of the season. Waller, balls to the Waller, has been really good this year. We'll talk about him later. But, Derek Carr was just really not David Carr, was really just very vanilla this year in terms of his production. He wasn't bad at times, but he wasn't really good either.
Hey, Kyle, it took 16 weeks almost, but you got it.
I got it.
You got it. You got the right name. Attaboy. Better late than never. All right, so those are the quarterbacks. Let's go ahead and move on to the running back position now. Let's see where we hit over there. All right, so for running back, this is the one we should be really proud of because this is where we really excelled here this year, and hopefully you guys benefited from it for your fantasy football teams. The first guy up, Dalvin Cook. Now, there's a lot of hate preseason for Dalvin Cook. A lot of people had zero faith in his ability to stay healthy, and I know we're putting this video out a couple days after he got hurt again, but it seems like there's an opportunity that he could play again this season. Kind of wait and see type there, but he was drafted as running back 10, currently running back 2. I made a video specifically on Dalvin Cook and why he was a must-have running back this season. If you go back to that video, I may actually link it down below. I got a lot of hate for that, and I was called some names for thinking that Dalvin Cook was going to be pretty good. Right now, 1,600 total yards, 13 touchdowns. I think he's doing just fine, and running back 2 overall.
I sent out a tweet in the preseason, and I said, the majority of people who win fantasy football championships this year are going to be people who draft DeAndre Hopkins in the first round and either Chubb or Cook in the second round. And even for a while, Cook was like a high third-round pick. It depends on your league, depends on your format, things like that. And then as we got to week 1 and he's healthy, all of a sudden, or week 1 of the preseason, all of a sudden his value skyrocketed. And then you have to take him like into the first. But it was a good thing people didn't pass on him, because even if he didn't win you a championship, he got you there this year.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, Aaron Jones. Another one of these guys where we made a specific video just on Aaron Jones, trying to tell you that you need to draft him this year because he doesn't need that 20 touch a game volume. He is very good. He's very efficient with Aaron Rodgers under center, that huge ceiling. And now he has 1,200 total yards and 17 total touchdowns. He was drafted as running back 13 off the board and is currently running back 3.
Yeah, I know that you liked him a lot more than I did. I was still worried about the timeshare there in Green Bay. I thought maybe, especially with how the offense last year with Matt LaFleur was handled in Tennessee, I thought maybe some of it would transition. But no, he's been excellent. You had a great call on that one.
Yep. Next up, and we actually kind of put these two together. They were in the same video, but we made multiple videos with both of these guys in it. Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. Derrick Henry right now running back 5, Nick Chubb running back 7. You can go to a lot of other websites, a lot of other channels. There are very few people that may have been higher on Nick Chubb than we were. We love Nick Chubb coming into the season. Derrick Henry, though, was on a must-own, running back must-own video for us early in the preseason, though, and they've both returned a lot of value. Right now, Derrick Henry, drafted as running back 18, currently running back 5. We knew it was going to be a run-first style of offense. That touchdown upside would be there every single week, and he's got 1,500 total yards and 15 touchdowns. For Nick Chubb, another one of these guys, we made a specific video just on Nick Chubb. He was drafted earlier still, though. He was drafted at running back 8, but he's right now the NFL's rushing leader. I mean, he's got 1,600 total yards and 8 touchdowns, and a lot of people were worried about what would happen when Kareem Hunt came back. The volume didn't really take a hit. Maybe some of the production fell off a little bit, but he's still a surefire running back 1, and right now running back 7 overall.
Yeah, and you nailed it with Chubb there. I mean, everybody was worried about Kareem Hunt. They thought he was going to come back and take over.
Get into my personal business, Kyle.
Anytime we get together, those things. Anyway, so yeah, so you nailed it there. You were absolutely correct. People worried about Kareem Hunt. I know that you weren't a big fan of him last year. I loved Kareem Hunt last year. We've been back and forth on that one a little bit. But even me being a huge Kareem Hunt truther, I said he's not taking anything away from Nick Chubb. Okay, draft Nick Chubb, do it. For Derrick Henry, I wrote an entire article prior to the season about him on why you needed to invest in Henry, because you could tell by the way Tennessee was investing in him with the weapons around him that they trusted to ride him this year. And they absolutely did that. And both of these guys, if you got them, especially Derrick Henry was like a 4th round, 5th round pick in some leagues at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Great value. And another one of these names that may have helped, put you into the fantasy championship at this point. Next up, Mark Ingram, somebody else who I was pretty high on him. He was like a 4th round pick in the preseason. I mean, we made another video. I mean, I'm starting to notice a theme here. We've made a lot of individual videos on a lot of these names that are inside the top 10 for the season. He was drafted as running back 22 and now has 1,100 total yards, 14 touchdowns. We knew that Lamar Jackson was going to run the ball a lot, and that could eat into some of the upside of Mark Ingram. But this offense just runs so much, it didn't really seem to matter at all. Mark Ingram still inside the top 10 at running back 8.
Yeah, we were adamant about Mark Ingram, a good mid-round flyer for you. The one thing was upside, would it be there? He's had upside some weeks, but the one thing he's been is steady. He's given you production, and that's really what you wanted, because more than likely you drafted him as a running back 2 or 3.
Yep, absolutely. And the last guy up here on the list for our hits, Leonard Fournette. A lot of people didn't want to touch this guy at all in the preseason, and I understood some of the concerns. He was kind of on the outs, it seemed like, in Jacksonville. They ended the season poorly in 2018. But what really boosted him up this year was his pass-catching upside. That's kind of a factor that we kind of maybe not expected to this level. Maybe, some more involvement in the passing game, but the guy has absolutely killed it this year. He's got 1,500 total yards, and he'd be even higher on this list, but he only has 3 touchdowns on the season. So just put that in perspective. Being at running back 9 with only 3 touchdowns, we could easily be looking at a top 5 running back here if he just fell into the end zone a couple more times.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my teams this year in the Scott Fish Bowl, I drafted Cook, I drafted Henry, and I drafted Leonard Fournette. Guess where I ended up? So that just tells you how good these guys were this year. But with those guys, there was a lot of risk. And that's when fantasy football, if you want to win something, sometimes you got to take those risks. You got to risk it for the biscuit.
The biscuit. I knew it was coming. As soon as you said
risk it,
I'm like, here comes the biscuit. All right, let's get into some of our top misses. And I will fully take, it's not credit, but whatever it is. This number one is my fault. This is Josh Jacobs of the Oakland Raiders. Now, and I had reasons in the preseason. Once again, I thought with the addition of Tyrell Williams and Antonio Brown that they would rely more on throwing the ball. Josh Jacobs hadn't done a whole lot volume-wise in college, and I was worried about how much he could hold up here in the NFL, being that lead back. Well, he was drafted at running back 19. He's currently running back 11, and he has played absolutely great despite some injuries this year. He's shown a lot of toughness, and another one of these workhorse running backs that's been going out there and getting close to 20 touches on a weekly basis. I missed on Josh Jacobs. Part of the reason, the area where he was being drafted at, I liked the Derrick Henry, the Mark Ingrams, the Aaron Jones a little bit more. Still worked out, but I totally whiffed on Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I mean, and part of it was right. I mean, we were worried about how he would hold up, and throughout the season, he hasn't held up. Now, you really can't say that about many running backs. Lots of running backs get beaten up, but we were worried about what would happen when he started to get knocked around with all those carries, and he did get beat up a little bit more. I wonder how that's going to play in the minds of fantasy owners for next year. We'll see what happens, but he ended up being really, really good this season when he was on the field.
Yep, absolutely. Next one up, Kenyon Drake. And a lot has changed for Kenyon Drake since we talked about him in the preseason where he was on the Dolphins. We thought that he was going to be getting lead back type touches. He already showed in previous years that he was, uber efficient. He didn't do hardly anything in Miami, didn't really get an opportunity to do anything. Got traded to the Arizona Cardinals, had 2 really big games. One this past week and then one with his first game with Arizona. And those inflated numbers in those 2 games boosted him up right now to RB20. So it's not that big of a miss for Kenyon Drake, but being that he scored the majority of these points in only 2 games, overall for the season, a huge miss. Didn't get the volume, didn't get the opportunity. As much as I liked him in the preseason, right around a 6th round pick, he didn't return that for 90% of the season.
And with Kenyon Drake, the main thing is that we thought that with Ryan Fitzmagic and his big arm that he'd be able to pull people down the field, maybe give Kenyon Drake a little bit of room to operate, but it just didn't end up happening. He had to get out of there. We'll see what happens over the offseason. Maybe we'll get sucked into Kenyon Drake again. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. If he's the lone guy in Arizona, maybe. We'll deal with that here in a few months, but
maybe.
Next one up, let's talk about Rashad Penny. You and I both loved Rashad Penny in the preseason because we kind of expected more of a committee style there in Seattle. They'd lost Mike Davis, who was somebody who was productive, and then we saw some glimpses of Penny last season. We're like, man, with no Mike Davis in this offense, if it's just Penny and Carson, there's more than enough volume for these guys to produce. Well, Penny struggled with injuries, and not only that, Chris Carson basically just held on to the job all season long, despite fumbling a lot, and there was a lot of, there's a chance that Rashad Penny could kind of squeak in there, ended up getting an injury. It's been the Chris Carson show majority of the season, though we didn't see a whole lot for Rashad Penny. He's currently running back 50 and falling.
Yeah, he was good in some glimpses here towards the end of the season. We thought too that if Chris Carson was going to be done because of some timely fumbles at the end of the year, that Penny might help you win some leagues. But yeah, the injury at the beginning of the season was what really got him. And then Carson they just love Chris Carson. That's it. They drafted Rashad Penny in the 1st round, but apparently that's not enough to love him. So I don't know what we're going to get heading into next year.
Yeah, no, they love him too much going forward that regardless, as long as Chris Carson's on the roster, he's going to be their number 1 guy. Last guy up is going to be Tevin Coleman here, San Francisco 49ers. A lot of people didn't want to touch this backfield in the preseason. I made a video saying backfields to avoid, and they were not on it. I expected them to run the ball well. What I didn't expect was Matt Breida and Raheem, not quite a must-start Mostert, to be as efficient and as effective as they were. Tevin Coleman really only had 1 big game all year long. He was a 6th round pick. I kind of expected him to kind of be like a low-end running back too. Maybe if you went heavier wide receiver, this is somebody who could get right there in the mid-rounds that may be okay for you. It never panned out. He's currently running back 34 and has been a huge disappointment and more than likely won't be back in San Francisco next year.
Yeah, I mean that was a tough one to call. I know that you loved him. I know that you love that backfield. I agreed with you that they were going to run the ball a whole lot. Problem with Coleman is outside that big game, he just wasn't really that efficient, and that's what the issue was. He was a little bit more efficient when he was in Atlanta, and that efficiency just dropped off the table for some reason in San Francisco.
Yep, agreed. All right, so those were all of our running backs. Not all of them. We're just going through a few of our major hits and misses. But now we've completed running backs. Let's head over to the wide receiver position and see how we did there. All right, so here we go, heading into wide receivers. First one up on the list may seem kind of cheesy, but it's Michael Thomas. And the reason I included Michael Thomas is we had a video in the preseason where I went through and I said, who is the safest wide receiver in the first round? A lot of people talk about Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham's name was thrown in there at times, but who was the safest option? And I named Michael Thomas as the safest option in that video, and I think it's turned out pretty well. The guy has 121 receptions, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was the 4th wide receiver off the board and the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver here in 2019.
Yeah, no, safest was the absolute correct call with him, 100%. I think some people thought maybe that he would, that with the signing of Latavius Murray, that maybe they would focus on the run game a little bit more. Maybe Drew Brees would finally start to show to be a human a little bit more. Jared Cook, maybe he was going to be better at the start of the season, but Michael Thomas has been good every single week, basically like he has for 2 years now.
Yep. All right, so next up, we're going to include these two together. Why? They play on the same team, and it's our show. We can do what we want to. But these are two names that we greatly pushed in the preseason. One of them, Mike Evans, we had an individual video just on him. Chris Godwin, another one of those, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks that we really tried to stress to people that if you went heavy running back early, this is the guy that you needed to go after, and he's absolutely produced a lot more than even we expected. He's currently wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. He's had 6 games with at least 120 yards receiving. I mean, he was drafted as wide receiver 18 off the board with Mike Evans opposite of him. Chris Godwin really feasted. Mike Evans kind of had some up and down weeks. He had some weeks where he clearly won you your matchup, some absolutely huge performances, and now he's done for the year hurt, not helping you too much in the fantasy playoffs, but still ended up 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, and both these guys, Godwin at number 2, Evans at number 4, both solid picks here in 2019 again.
We could probably do an entire 30-minute video on why we liked these guys so much, but people were like, nope, that's incorrect. And one of them was Jameis Winston. People didn't trust Jameis Winston, but we already talked about him on the show and why you should not have to worry about him getting you volume. And he got volume to both of these guys. And Evans, every single year, I feel like he's just completely disrespected in fantasy drafts because people are like, this is your. I mean, the dude has over 1,000 yards every single season since he's come into the season or come into the league, excuse me. And then with Chris Godwin showed signs of those breakouts. And if Evans is going to be covered and you have Jameis Winston throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game, what it seems like, those passes are going to have to go somewhere else. They have to go to Godwin. The volume was always going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And two of these guys that will be probably highly drafted once again in 2020, which is weird to say 2020. I had to think about it for a second. There's not a teen involved. Anyway, moving on. Next. Huh?
I said, oh my gosh.
I know, it sounds weird. Next up, Allen Robinson. Now, this was his second year here in this offense, another year with Mitch Trubisky. He was drafted as wide receiver 29, currently at wide receiver 11. I mean, he's really started to pick up his production here second half of the season. You actually outlined why Allen Robinson was a great time to buy him in dynasty leagues here in the offseason because his value was so low that it was something you could go in and really return on some great value, which he did right now, currently wide receiver 11.
Yeah, now my wanting to buy Allen Robinson was more of like a 2020 stash because I really thought Anthony Miller was going to have a big year this year. I thought David Montgomery was going to be a lot bigger or a lot better than what he was. I didn't think David Montgomery was going to be a running back 1. Okay, no, we're not that channel. However, I thought he was going to be better than what he was. And with those two things and Mitchell Trubisky, how good was he going to be? Was he even though Trubisky has been awful most weeks, Allen Robinson still has returned value some way, shape, or form. So, I mean, he's exceeded my expectations by quite a bit.
Yep, 100% agree. All right, next up, Tyler Lockett. Now, a lot of people try to block out a few weeks here at the end of the season where he totally screwed your fantasy team, but we had him listed as a potential league winner, and maybe he's picking up just at the right time. This past week totally went off. Definitely somebody, though, who has returned a lot of value because you got him at a great price on draft day. He was drafted as wide receiver 20, currently wide receiver 14. He really probably carried your fantasy lineups probably for the first 9 weeks of the season. He's going to have another year with over 1,000 yards, over 7 touchdowns. weeks 10 through 14, I guess you can say they kind of sucked. But he's starting to turn the corner back to what we saw there the first half of the season. Tyler Lockett is a great option, this year and probably moving forward in the Seattle offense.
Yeah, people are really worried about that efficiency. No way he can keep this up. No way he can score those touchdowns again. And guess what? For the most part, he did. And going into next year, I bet you're going to be able to get him in a value again because people are going to shift their focus to DK Metcalf a little bit. But I think DK Metcalf has been a big reason why Tyler Lockett has been able to be so good this year. So I'm not giving Tyler Lockett up at a discount. I definitely would love him as a wide receiver too next year.
Yep, totally agree. All right, let's move on to some of our misses. And once again, it seems like I'm the one taking it square on the chin with the first name up. It's a theme going on here. It's Cooper Kupp. I did not like Cooper Kupp in the preseason. And the reason
I didn't either.
You didn't either, but I really didn't like him. And I took the blame for this one, Kyle, so you're good. I'm taking it for the team on this one. But, coming off of the ACL injury that he had last November, I didn't think that he had enough time to fully recover. We kind of saw it the year prior with Dalvin Cook. He had hamstring issues. I was expecting at some point maybe Kupp gets a little bit limited. Well, he started off so hot that even though he struggled here second half of the season, he's still wide receiver 5 overall, which is absolutely crazy because a lot of people haven't really been able to count on him maybe for the last 5 to 7 weeks, but his first half of the season was so big, it kind of made up for it. Currently at wide receiver 5, one of the guys that I missed on.
Yeah, no, it's the injury too. It's not that we didn't think he couldn't play well or that he would. It was the injury. How long was it going to take him to get back and be fully healthy? You already have Todd Gurley. You have Cooks and Woods. How is he going to be able to find some targets if he can't be on the field all that much? Due to superhuman, he got back way quicker than what we thought he did, and he just killed it at the start of the year.
Yep, absolutely. Next one up, if Baker Mayfield was a miss, I can almost guarantee you that Odell Beckham is going to be a miss for us because even though we weren't, preaching Odell Beckham as wide receiver 1, because that wasn't the case, we did like the potential upside with him and Baker Mayfield. We figured, heck, if he could produce with Eli Manning, what could he do in this offense with Baker Mayfield? Well, he didn't do a whole lot. Now, he may not have been 100% healthy all season long, but we're not going to use that excuse. He did not perform. We already talked about this offense. Odell Beckham currently wide receiver 33.
Yeah, that's a tough one to take. That was a tough one to take because he's far too talented, and this offense was far too talented for them to all play outside of Nick Chubb this poorly. So hopefully they get that coaching staff in order. Honestly, Freddie Kitchens should probably be gone. Let's get a veteran head coach in there, an offensive mind, so they can really utilize all the talent that they have and really perform better next season. But one thing I want everyone to keep in mind, if you think of free agent wide receivers and teams that they go to, Marvin Jones is one that, kind of stands out when he went to Detroit a couple of years ago. Golden Tate in a preseason or in an in-season trade. I mean, when guys like that, when wide receivers switch teams, it might take a little bit of time. So I'll still buy Odell Beckham Jr. next year at a discount.
Yeah, and it depends if he's still in Cleveland. I mean, who knows what happens there in the off season? Just something to pay attention to. All right, the next couple guys, more mid to late round guys that we liked their value that just never really materialized into anything. First one up, Larry Fitzgerald, Arizona Cardinals. I figured this could be his last season in Arizona. Do they have some type of going away season for Larry Fitzgerald where they just overly force feed him the ball? Kyler Murray under center with Cliff Kingsbury in a more opened up air raid style offense. Larry Fitzgerald really didn't do a whole lot. He was drafted as wide receiver 41. He's currently wide receiver 40, so the people got it right. Larry Fitzgerald right there didn't do anything to really wow anybody or to really, make them want to go after him once again if he plays next season.
Yeah, and I think the growth of Kyler Murray, I mean, we saw, Patrick Mahomes be the big thing last year. Lamar Jackson, the big thing this year. Is it Kyler Murray next year? I think he takes another step forward. I think Cliff Kingsbury, for as bad as the Arizona Cardinals were, I think it was a lot on the defensive side of the ball. Cliff Kingsbury, though, everybody hated that hire. No one really loved it. I loved it. I think he's going to be a really good coach. On the offensive side of the ball, it hasn't been too bad so far this season. So let's give this offense more time to develop. Let's get him a better running back situation. Let's give him an offensive line. Maybe next year, but again, is he even going to be back next year? Fitzgerald could be done at this point.
Yep, absolutely. Next up is going to be Sammy Watkins. And we didn't overly push Sammy Watkins to anybody. The reason he's on the list is because we kind of mentioned, hey, to start the season, Tyreek Hill facing the suspension. Maybe Sammy Watkins is somebody who you can draft in those mid-rounds and then flip before Tyreek Hill gets back. Well, Sammy Watkins came out the gate hot with a huge week 1. And then after that, has basically been a non-factor at all, not involved in this offense whatsoever, despite Tyreek Hill missing a few games. Sammy Watkins, wide receiver, 45, didn't turn into much.
Yeah, and that's what you kind of said it there. A little bit of a side note was draft him now, wait for him to go off, and then trade him away before Hill's back. But then Hill didn't end up missing any time except for having the injury. He wasn't suspended having the injury. Watkins has that huge week 1. So unless you sold Watkins after week 1, you probably didn't get anything for him. So unfortunately, that little trade there probably didn't work out too well.
No, probably not. Lastly, it's Geronimo Allison, and heck, you could almost put MVS up here if you wanted to also. It was really the wide receiver 2 of the Green Bay Packers. Allison kind of had that chemistry at times the year prior with Rodgers, kind of expected him to come in and be a huge, huge value. He just never did. Neither one of these guys, MVS or Geronimo Allison, became fantasy viable options this year. It was basically just Devontae Adams and these running backs. I mean, that was it for the majority of the season. Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams carried this team on the offensive side of the football. From times you'd see flashes from Alan Lazard or somebody like that, but neither one of these guys, Geronimo Allison, MVS, turned into anything worth a damn here in 2019.
Yeah, and I was looking at who's going to win that slot role because I thought whoever was going to play in the slot would be the guy that really would return value. I thought it would be MVS. I know you thought it would be Allison. We went back and forth on that one a little bit, but it doesn't matter because we were both wrong. It didn't matter because neither guy did anything.
Yeah, both sucked. All right, so those are all the wide receivers, or at least a few of the hits and misses for 2019. Now let's head over to the tight end position, which is an absolute wasteland and almost impossible to get anything right on all year long, but we managed to get a couple, Kyle. So let's look at the tight ends here real quick. All right, so looking at the tight ends here, a few of our hits. Number 1, Eric Ebron. You see the little void next to his name. We did not like him this past year. A lot of people wanted to buy the touchdown production from the year prior. We didn't see him, sustaining that into 2019. Absolutely. However, we also didn't see him getting injured. We're not throwing him here on a hit list because he got hurt and didn't perform. He didn't perform the entire season leading up to that. He only had 2 games in which he played over 50 yards, 3 touchdowns in the 11 games he played. He wasn't producing when he was on the field. Therefore, if you invested a high draft pick on him, more than likely you ended up cutting him here a few weeks into the season. Eric Ebron, one of the hits for us, currently tight end 23, and he's falling because he's hurt and not playing.
Yeah, and we didn't even like him when we knew Andrew Luck was going to be the quarterback. And then when Jacoby Brissett became the quarterback, it's like, all right, he really loved Jack Doyle, who we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Is not going to love Eric Ebron nearly as much. But you're right. It was the touchdown production that you just couldn't buy because if you looked at it last year when Jack Doyle was actually on the field, more targets, more snaps, everything. So Doyle was the superior tight end when on the field with Eric Ebron last year. So that's why we were like, probably not continuing this year.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, Darren Waller, #balls to the Waller. If you got our draft guide, you knew about Darren Waller probably before anybody else.
Yep.
We had him pretty high last year, especially because of the performance that we saw 2018 from Jared Cook. We knew this offense was going to continue to utilize the tight end. He was drafted as tight end 24. Some leagues went undrafted. Currently tight end 3 in a position that is an absolute wasteland in fantasy football. Darren Waller has been a very pleasant surprise for a lot of people here this year.
Yeah, this is probably one of my proudest picks this season because, like you said, in the draft guide, when I was talking about my sleepers, he was a guy that I really outlined, and I said, wait on tight end. Unless you get a guy, like we had like 3 guys in the middle rounds that we would take a look at. If you don't miss or if you don't get one of those guys, then you're going to look at Darren Waller really, really, really late. Like you said, he went undrafted in a lot of leagues. I think a majority of the people who watch this channel actually probably got Darren Waller after week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. He was not somebody that was on a lot of rosters to begin with. But the next guy may have been undrafted in a few leagues also. Probably not because it started to, really ramp up some hype for him once preseason took over. But Mark Andrews, I remember having multiple shows that we did together. We're saying, hey, who is this year's surprise tight end? Who is this year's George Kittle that we saw in 2018? And each and every time we were asked that, Mark Andrews is the name that came up. He's currently tight end 4 right now. We knew that the Baltimore offense was going to be a heavy run offense and really utilize the tight end position. He may have exceeded some expectations, but overall, Mark Andrews has been a great tight end here for majority of the season.
Yeah, he's Lamar Jackson's favorite target. And week in and week out, I would see questions. Should we trust Andrews this week? Should we put him in our lineup? Yes, put him in your lineup. Now towards the end of the season, a little banged up. So that changed our opinion a little bit if there was guys with higher upside. But basically all season long, he's been a guy that we just plug and play.
Yep, absolutely. All right, some of the misses. And I mean, I think there's not very many people that were great at tight end to begin with, but there was a few names that we liked here in the preseason that didn't turn out to anything. One of them, Evan Ingram, New York Giants. I mean, yeah, he struggled staying healthy. He's only played 8 games, but in those 8 games he played, he only had 2 games with at least 50 yards receiving, only 3 touchdowns this year. Quarterback play is somewhat to blame for that, starting off with Eli, moving to Daniel Jones. It just never really worked out this year. Evan Ingram had a lot of hype preseason, ended up not doing a whole lot of anything, currently tight end 16 overall.
I will say this. It was definitely a miss, 100%. But if he had been healthy all year, I don't think we would have been able to put him here because he was actually top 10 in terms of points per game. But with the switch over to Daniel Jones as well, I know really in that first game against Tampa Bay, Daniel Jones and Evan Ingram really connected, but would he have been able to keep that up all year long? He may have been really low tight end one basically by the end of the year. But like a lot of people said, a lot of you here that watch his channel, you were worried about injuries, and that's what ended up getting him this year again.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, we mentioned him when we talked about Eric Ebron, and I hate to have him in the miss category, but it's Jack Doyle of the Indianapolis Colts. I actually had him outlined as a late round league winner because we didn't like Ebron. I love Jack Doyle because of it, and you could get him a lot cheaper late in drafts. It never really turned out to anything, even once Andrew Luck retired. Even once Eric Ebron went down with injury, Jack Doyle still hasn't put together a string of consistent games. Only 2 games this year with more than 50 yards receiving, and it's been kind of a letdown. A lot of people were really excited once Ebron got hurt that they may have stashed Jack Doyle or grabbed him off of waivers thinking that, hey, this wasteland of a position, I finally got a tight end, and nothing really came of it.
Yep, no, he's exactly it. Just unfortunately, it just hasn't materialized into what we had potentially thought. Jacoby Brissett loved Jack Doyle the last time that he actually played back when Andrew Luck was hurt a couple of years ago. But again, just never materialized. Unfortunately, that just happens sometimes.
Absolutely, but we'll end it with the biggest miss maybe of the tight end position. It's Vance McDonald, who we both liked. I mean, this is somebody who going into the draft, he was drafted as tight end 8 overall in fantasy drafts. Currently tight end 33. Now, a lot has, played a part in this. He's played 12 games, but we kind of expected an offense with Big Ben under center, with Juju on the outside. That kind of really limited the upside. I mean, this guy's gone through multiple quarterbacks this year. Not somebody who has gone out and produced consistently at all. We figured with no Jesse James in the mix, maybe this is finally his time. Nothing ever came to happen with Vance McDonald, tight end 33 right now.
Yeah, for as good as the calls were at the beginning of the season of Waller and Andrews, you have to also toss on here Vance McDonald, and you didn't put him on here, but I'm going to add him real quick, OJ Howard. I was really high on OJ Howard. There was those 3 in the middle rounds. I said skip on Kelsey, Ertz, and then when we get more in Kittle, and then when we get to the middle rounds, focus on Ingram, Howard, and then it just didn't end up working out this year. Didn't end up working out the way that we wanted it to. But again, really good calls at tight end, some bad calls. Vance McDonald, the big thing with him, unfortunately, he just didn't have the yards after catch that he did last year. He was top 3 in the entire NFL in 2018 for yards after the catch per reception of all positions, not just tight end, all positions. It hasn't even been close this year, but maybe that has to do with the injuries at quarterback as well. But anyway, if you spent a draft pick on him, you haven't gotten anything from him.
No, absolutely not. Tight end may have been, how about this? 2019 tight end may have been the most difficult position in the history of fantasy football to try to figure out. You had those big names at the top, and then after that, it's been a crapshoot every single week. A lot of people want to point fingers and say, this guy was supposed to be good. Well, look at the position as a whole, and with a straight face tell me that anybody could go out there and pick which one of these guys was going to do anything. It's been horrible in 2019. Hopefully 2020 can be a little bit better. Maybe some of the younger guys that we've seen take a step forward, maybe in 2019, kind of turn into something solid in 2020. Something to pay attention to in their future, but those were the top tight end hits and misses here for 2019. All right, so those were a few of the top hits for Kyle and myself here for 2019. Like we've always talked about, we're always going to be transparent on this channel. We're not going to be 100% correct. Nobody is going to be 100% correct, but this is why we always give reasons with our picks. We don't just say, we like this guy, and then just throw out a name. We try to give you that information to help you, the team owner, make the decision. That's what this is all about. We're not controlling your teams. We're not telling you what to do on a weekly basis. Trying to provide that information to make those decisions just easier on you. So, Kyle, congratulations on a great 2019. I think as a whole, the channel did absolutely great with some of these picks. The running back position absolutely killed it. More than likely, if people followed our suggestions preseason with running backs, they're sitting pretty here majority of 2019. But a lot of great calls all across the board. Anything else you want to say here, Kyle?
No, I mean, in the comments, we saw it all year long. Hey, started 0 in this or 1 in that. And then I found your channel mid-season and now I'm at this and I'm in the playoffs. So whether you started with us at the beginning of the year or you're finishing the year with us, it doesn't matter. Stay tuned. The off season is going to have a ton of content. Again, told the live stream that typically we're coming back late May, early June, dropping videos as much as possible. Don't go anywhere. Stick around because 2020 is going to be even bigger.
Yep, that's right. We're producing videos here all year long. We're not going anywhere. Yeah, they're not going to be 7 a week once the season ends, but tons and tons of content to still talk about and things to involve not only us, but you, the community. And we greatly appreciate your support for such a great 2019. Fantasy football championships are right around the corner. We're talking about them here. We're trying to help as many people out in the comment section as we can. Greatly appreciate that support. Good luck this weekend. We'll talk to you later.